Hi, I'm Shawn Wilson, Secretary for the Department of Transportation and Development. And in the midst of this storm, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to do two things. One, just to give extreme thanks for all of the hardworking men and women of not just DOTD, but our partners, state police, National Guard, local government officials, but more specifically for DOTD, because they've been the ones that have been out salting roads and away from home through this entire event. While many state employees and others were in the warmth of their home and the comfort and safety of where they were, our men and women were out clearing roads, ensuring that they were safe for travel and for commerce to continue. So a big kudos and shout out to say thank you to those folks. I'd also like to acknowledge that we understand the difficulty of being locked in your home under snow and ice and other events, particularly during a pandemic. We too, in many cases, had to operate in extreme conditions. So we are very thoughtful about you all and wanted to make sure we did everything we could to make those of you who had to travel do so safely. You know, I'd like to dispel a couple of rumors as well. Folks talk about we could have done more and DOTD didn't do this and didn't do that. It's important for you to know that over the preemption phase of this event, we did what our plan calls for us to do, which is to preemptively close certain roads. Those are roads that may have low EDT, may be extremely difficult to maintain, use an extraordinary amount of resources and time to keep open during an event. So we actually make decisions around what we close and when we close them, and we ensure that we have north, south, east, and west corridors, particularly for truck traffic, as well as essential services. And so folks will say, did you do enough? Well, you never can do enough when you fight Mother Nature. We have to learn to live with Mother Nature and not just try to overcome the powers that she offers us. So in advance of this storm, over 3 million pounds of salt were dispersed, primarily in the target area of where this storm hit, all the way from South Louisiana to North Louisiana, from the west coast of the state to the east coast of the state. In addition to those 3 million pounds of salt, over 60,000 gallons of brine was also spread out on our system in advance of this storm. And you should know that that is the largest single day distribution effort that we've ever done in fighting ice. And then those folks are going to say, well, you should have snow plows and you should have this and you should have that. Well, in reality, we get snow maybe once or twice a year, and nothing to this magnitude typically. And so we could invest what limited resources we have in snow plows and the state-of-the-art snow equipment, and it would sit in the shelter and it would sit in the garage. And when we pull it out, guess what? It won't work and we'll be in a very, very difficult position. But instead of having snow plows, we use trucks, we use skid steers, we use motor graders, we use sweepers, all of those tools that have attachments to them that allow us to do the same thing that a plow can do, but we best use those resources because we use those trucks and other equipment on the daily routines. In fact, in North Louisiana, you have the best fleet of snow fighting equipment because you typically deal with snow. Down in South Louisiana, we have more pumps and things to deal with floods and those type of events. So we've used the best resources we possibly can. We've got over 180 trucks, probably 50 plus dump trucks that are equipped with salt spreader equipment that double during the regular part of the year for moving gravel and sand and aggregate. Moving equipment and moving materials. And then during this event, we pre-stage and equip the salt dog and other types of spreading equipment and sprayers to do brine and to do salt. So it's a significant effort. You should know that about 1,400 plus of our employees have been working in 24-hour cycles and will continue to do so until we repeal and remove all of the salt and ice that's there. Here's another best practice. I tweeted this out earlier this week where we had about 1.5 inches of ice. No matter how much salt or spreaders that we put on that equipment or on that pavement, that ice isn't going to melt instantly like that. So there's a best practice to what we do, and it's all across our region, particularly in the Gulf states, that practice how we crack ice, how we use this equipment. One of the byproducts of using the skid steers and just scraping it off from the pavement is you lose striping and you lose buttons, and that creates a safety issue. So there's a thought process behind what we do, and I am so appreciative of our folks in terms of what we do. Now, the other thing I'd like to tell you is when we advise people not to travel, it's for a good reason. The vast majority of the backups that we've seen on the interstate have been a result of jackknife trucks, accidents that have occurred. And when that accident occurs, It allows everything ahead of it to freeze up because there's nobody driving on it, and everything behind it starts a backlog of traffic and congestion. And for 18-wheelers, that can be difficult for their brake systems to work and they stall. And then you have typical issues of sliding and gliding on ice that can cause accidents and be unsafe. And so we never want that to happen. And so at the end of the day, we have over 111,000 hits to 511la.org. So the vast majority of people are listening and paying attention to where we have road closures and how it may change at the drop of a dime, and how it will defrost a little bit and then maybe get above freezing. And then that evening, as the temperature drops, guess what? That ice and the water and the effort refreezes again. We may have more precipitation as we did at the very beginning of this winter storm in the first phase and in the second phase. We'll do a few quick questions. Why isn't I-20 open yet? Well, there are segments of I-20 that are open. Just this morning, we reopened I-20. Last night, in the middle of the night, I got an email and talked to a truck driver who had been stranded in traffic on I-20. It wasn't a result of ice, it was a result of a jackknife truck. And so we had maybe 30 to 40 trucks in one stretch near Arcadia and Gibbsland and Grambling, Louisiana. And the problem wasn't that the roads couldn't move or that individuals couldn't drive on the roads, it's they couldn't get by the truck. The reality is tow trucks weren't coming out in this temperature, so we had to use heavy equipment from National Guard. We had one truck that worked throughout the night with state police and DOTD, and we actually moved that log jam or that blockage of traffic and got it open again. And so traffic is moving, although it's slowly moving, but it's moving nonetheless. The other reason why you may see segments of the interstate closed is because when you get on it, when you take an off-ramp, if you think about the ice building up on that off-ramp going down, you're going to slide right through an intersection and that will be unsafe, or you're going to attempt to go up, particularly if you have a large load. And so most of the traffic that we see stuck on the interstate are folks who were driving through Louisiana, not necessarily going from one off-ramp a few miles to another off-ramp. And so the interstate is open. On I-20, there are sections that you might have a closure typically due to an accident, and that's no different than a dry day or a wet day. Many of you have experienced closures and lane restrictions because of accidents. The same thing happens in a snowstorm or a winter event, except that there's a higher propensity for the type of accident. We've had more jackknifed trucks than we've had in a long time in a very, very short window. State police has worked a number of accidents where that's been the case. And so there's your answer as to why isn't I-20 open. When we open it, we try to maintain it, but you're going to have refreezing. Tonight, for example, we're going to get below 20 degrees north of I-20, which means water or any other liquid that's standing there or ice that hasn't melted, guess what? It's going to refreeze, and we're going to have to go back out again and continue to chop it up and spread salt and brine as we do that to slosh it and move it around so that it can be passable.
Would you advise people who are passing through Louisiana to take I-10 to go south if possible?
You know, folks often talk about what's the best way to get across Louisiana because both I-10 and I-20 are multimodal corridors, and we see this with water. On I-10, several times during my tenure as Secretary, we've had to close I-10 either at the Texas line or on this side of the Texas line between Lafayette and Lake Charles. And we've directed folks with our dynamic message system to go north and travel along I-20 and then come back south. It's reversed for these winter storms because along that 20 corridor all the way into Dallas is going to be other icy conditions and maybe unsafe conditions. And so last night, for example, we detoured folks off of I-20 when we had to close it because of that accident and move folks to 165 and then down to I-49. When they got to I-49, you have an option. You could either go back north to I-49 and get back into that icy, cold, frozen tundra of Interstate 20, or you can continue south and go across I-10 and get to the points in Texas. There's a cost to that, and that's the nature of what we do in infrastructure. Time and travel costs. At least you're safer and you have more resources and you have an opportunity to rest appropriately and safely if you travel outside of the target area, which is really that freeze zone north of I-20 and right south of I-20. So we do advise folks in these storm events to take the nearest route to get south And if you absolutely have to stay on 20 because you're dropping off goods and services, then we do that. We try to keep it open for you. But where you can, take the advised detours. They're done with consultation with state police, local law enforcement, and of course the DOTD folks on the ground.
One more question about the barricades. What are the dangers of people going around the barricades for our workers and for them?
A big part of what we do at DOTD is provide information and provide guidance. And so we close roads, we deem certain roads impassable. We've put over 500 barricades and signs out just in the North Louisiana area over this storm. And so when folks drive around those barricades, they're taking their lives in their own hands because we have deemed them completely unsafe and impassable and warranting a type 3 barrier of some sort. We've set it up and we have traffic configurations and operations in some cases behind that barricade to open up the road or to clear the road of an accident. And so when you go around that barricade, you're not only putting your life in danger, you may be putting another citizen's life in danger who's actually spreading salt, picking up pieces of equipment or cars or accident materials, spreading salt or spreading sand in that footprint. You might be hitting those folks when you lose control. And remember, when you're driving on ice, it's not advisable, it's not smart, and it's not predictable. When someone decides to take life in their own hands and disregard that advice, they go through there, they find themselves hurt or in an accident, and then that uses additional resources that can be used to rescue people who are advisably and realistically caught in snow and trapped in other areas. And so when you disregard those, you use extra resources when something goes wrong. Can't guarantee you that you'll make it across, but I can't guarantee you that you will have an accident either. The reality is when we tell you not to go there, it's for a reason. And so when we see stories about folks trapped for days on the interstate, that's because they're doing things that we advised against. We understand the need and necessity to have to move goods and materials and supplies, but we want you to do so smartly. So whatever you do, please don't ever drive around a barricade, whether you're going through water or snow, because we've investigated and thought enough about that situation to put a barricade up to say don't travel there. And so I appreciate all of you who pay attention to all of the advice that you get from the department and the governor about not driving if you don't have to, and being a part of this effort to try and keep people safe, because we really take that seriously. We spent a lot of time working with hospitals and essential services, ensuring water equipment and other things to deal with breaks and cracks in lines were available and accessible. So it's a comprehensive effort, not just with DOTD, but with state police, with National Guard, with Child and Family Services for warming stations. All of those things is what it takes to make it difference and to make it work. So this is not a unique circumstance. We appreciate your patience. We appreciate your adherence to our guidelines. And as we start to open roads up, the South is opened up. We're going to start to dig out in the North today, provided we get some sunshine and that Mother Nature warms those pavements. We'll see back. We'll see this back together and back to normal as we always do. And so I appreciate your patience. I hope this has explained a little bit about what we do. And when you see someone from DOTD, thank them because they're taking their lives in their own hands when they go out there to try and haul people off and move ice because it is a dangerous environment. So be safe. Thank you for paying attention and stay warm.